like being creative in the kitchen and experimenting with foods in the most healthful and unique ways that inspiration comes to me. In this video, I share with you a gluten-free pancake idea using oats, some herbs, and superfoods. I encourage you to play around with these kinds of ideas and not limit yourself to traditional thinking of how things are done, aka white flour and sugar, etc., etc. I hope you enjoy this video, and above all, play and have fun with your healthful food creations. Alright, so this is going to be a makeshift recipe for gluten-free pancakes, and the reason I was inspired to make this is because I had these oat kernels lying around that I wanted to finish up. So what I did is I germinated them for 8 hours soaked in water, and then I allowed them to germinate for 24 hours after I took them out of the water. And then I dehydrated them. So they're preserved right now, and they've been, and it's, a lot of more of the nutritional value is unlocked when you go through the germination process. And I thought, what would be a nice creative way to use these guys? So I thought, why not try to make some oat-based pancakes? So here we are. This is going to be obviously the main ingredient here, and I've got 2/3 of a cup of oats, and I'm going to put this in the Vitamix. It's ingredient number 1. Next solid ingredient, I thought I'd add in because I love adding hemp parts to almost everything I eat, and they're very nutritious. And I'm going to be adding about this is half a cup of the hemp heart into the mix here. And by the way, I'm making this up as I go, so that's one of my favorite things to do actually with cooking, is to really experiment and see how things work out. Because you never know what you're going to get unless you try. And now I like adding a lot of spices and things for additional flavors. So what I've decided I'm going to use is Ceylon cinnamon, and I really like cinnamon, so I'm going to go ahead with a full, almost heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. That's that. Maca is another awesome food that I love to add for its adaptogenic qualities, and it adds a nice combination flavor with other things. So I'm going to do also a full rounded teaspoon of maca. I decided I also want to add ashwagandha because I like using at least one, sometimes 2 teaspoons of this daily for also its adaptogenic qualities and other qualities that are quite helpful in Ayurvedic medicine. You can look up ashwagandha. And I'm going to add a full teaspoon of this as well. Turmeric is another spice that I love to use a lot in a lot of foods that I make because it's very anti-inflammatory, and I also like the flavor of it as well. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of that. Now, in my research, turmeric is much more absorbable and used by the body with black pepper. So I'm going to add just a sprinkle of that. And while I'm on the shakers, I'm also going to add some Himalayan and sea salt combination. Probably about 1/4 teaspoon. Also, because I really think the iodide is very important for especially thyroid function, and we don't really get any of this in her diet generally speaking. I like to augment my diet with as much sea vegetables as I can when I can. So this here is powdered kelp, which is probably one of the higher known sort of sea-based sources of iodine in plants. And I'm going to put in a little less, because it can have a bit of an overwhelming taste depending. So I'm going to do a little less than a teaspoon. Now, I don't have any fresh bananas, but I do have red banana powder. If I was using a fresh banana, I'd put it in here, and I would probably add a little less water later. But because I'm going to use red banana powder, I'm going to use a little more water. And if you do have anything like this, I'm going to play with about 1, 2, and 3 feels about good, because this is kind of concentrated. So I have just about over a cup of dry ingredients in here, and so for the water I'm going to add about 2/3 as much as I have the solid substance, and see how that texture plays out, and then if necessary I can always add either more water or more dry ingredients. So just measuring this out here will take me to 1 cup and 3/4. There we go. Now I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients, and I am making blueberry banana flavor pancakes. So I have frozen blueberries, fresh or always obviously more awesome, and I'm going to be putting in 2/3 cups of frozen wild crafted blueberries. Now the last ingredient I'm going to play with here is coconut oil. There we go. Now I love coconut oil because it is not only beautifully tasting and it adds a little bit of subtle sweetness into things, but also it's one of the healthiest saturated, largely saturated fat, and it has lauric acid is the main fatty content of the coconut oil, so it makes it very antimicrobial. And you can use this for everything. You can apply it to your skin as moisturizer. You can use it for lubrication and sex. You can use this for massaging your hair and rejuvenating your scalp. Honestly, if you look this up on the internet, you'll find unlimited uses for this stuff. And culinary stuff, this is one of the highest heat thresholds, so I recommend coconut oil or ghee above anything else if you're going to be using oil in cooking. Now I'm going to put in 1 full rounded teaspoon of coconut oil in this. And that completes our mixture. Now I'm going to rally this up in the Vitamix and see how the texture comes out. Also, one of the awesome things about coconut oil, or adding any oil to a recipe, is that the fat allows you to grab fat-soluble vitamins. That's something that your body might struggle to absorb otherwise without having fat in the recipe or meal that you're eating. Now I did blend this up, and the consistency is slightly more runny than I want, so I'm going to improvise by adding some ground flax seeds and I don't recommend that you buy ground flax seeds. Grind your own fresh, because the highly sensitive omega-3 fatty oils in here will go rancid easily. Now what I did is I like having some ground up ready to go, but I keep this locked in the freezer, an airtight container, so that it preserves freshness as much as possible. Now to get this to thicken up a bit, I'm going to use, I think, 3 tiny teaspoons and see how that works out. So let's check it out. And with the Vitamix, always start low, work your way up in the high speed. There we go. That's much better. More smooth, more viscous. That's what we're going to experiment with. Alright, so the batter does thicken up a fair bit when adding the flax, so if it gets too viscous, you might want to add a little bit more water. So now that I've got the batter ready, I am using a titanium pan that's non-stick, so I don't need to add any oil. If I did need to, I would use a little bit of coconut oil, not a lot. So I'm going to do just little ones using a scoop here. And it's not really too runny. I probably should have put a little bit more water, not going to lie, but that's okay. And when that's down, want to flatten it out a bit. Now it's very important that the pan is preheated before putting anything on, otherwise you're just going to get a really uneven consistency with the cooking. And you want to keep the temperature at low-medium heat so that it doesn't burn too quickly. And I am noticing that with this particular batter, because this is not a traditional flour by any means, it does have a little bit of higher moisture content, so it stays a bit more soft on the inside with a little bit more humid texture, as opposed to more perhaps the fluffiness that you might get with traditional pancake batters. So bearing that in mind, you will get a different experience with this particular variation. So it doesn't take very long to harden on one side. So once I have that, and I flip that over, and I want these to stay thin so that they don't have too much sort of like a rubbery texture in the middle. So I will press down on them to make them as flat as I can. And it doesn't take very long to develop that sort of crusty brown almost, which tells you that's pretty much almost ready to go. Also, you definitely start to notice the aromas start to come out. So it really doesn't take too long to do. Just go let it go a little bit longer on that side. So on the first, as soon as it's laid down, I probably left it for just under a minute. And then after I flip it, I'll probably leave it on for another 1 to 2 minutes before I flip it over again. And so if you want, you can even actually just break off a little piece and see how well done it is. Just be careful so you don't burn yourself. So you can see it's kind of like, you can see that it's that little bit of rubbery moisture texture on the inside a little bit. But it tastes fine. So I think I'll leave it on just for less than a minute. Actually, way less, because I'm seeing that it's starting to bubble up. So that definitely tells me that it's thin enough that the heat has permeated through to lift it out this way. So that's going to be good. Take that out, and I suggest that you, while you're preparing more, keep them in the oven. Just have a plate in the oven, and that way you can transfer it there under very low heat just to keep them warm. And yeah, so you definitely probably helpful to have a larger pan. I'm using a small one, but if you have a larger one, it'll probably be more helpful so that you can do 2, maybe even 3 all at the same time. There you go. So I'm just going to repeat this until I'm done my batter, and we'll go from there. So given the amount of materials that we used, it's enough to make about 8 to 10 pancakes about this size. And my traditional favorite method, of course, is to add a little bit of natural maple syrup. But really don't use too much, because any sweetener, no matter how, quote, healthy it is, it still activates the same blood sugar pathways in your body, and it can do more harm than good, and usually does. So I'm just using a little bit and then spreading it around. That way you don't have to drench the whole thing raining in maple syrup, or whatever sweetener you want to use. I like this one. And then you can top it with whatever you like. My favorites, of course, are cinnamon. Lots of cinnamon. And I also like carob, which gives it a little bit of a chocolatey flavor, but it's not chocolate. And you can even, ginger is another one I like to use as well, just powdered ginger. And so I'm just going to use these 2 for now, but it tastes pretty good. Just make sure that you get them nice and flat. And there you go. Bon appetit. Nice flavors. Hope you enjoyed that. And play around with it. Change up the consistency, the ingredients, whatever you like, don't like. You can use any grain. I just recommend that you sprout them. You don't have to dehydrate them, because after you sprout them, you can just blend them in with the liquids, the water, the fresh banana, whatever you're using. And there you go. You can make pancakes out of anything other than traditional white refined flour. There you go, guys. Cheers.